Yeah, so my name is Michael Brooks. I previously worked at Nitobi, now Adobe. I pretty much work on anything inside of Apache Cordova or PhoneGap, whatever the lowest hanging fruit is. For the past year and a bit, it's really been docs. I feel like the community side and the docs have the biggest payoff at the moment. Perhaps command line tooling is where our attention will be focusing in the future. So today I'll be talking about contributing to Apache Cordova. You can check out my own slides here and kind of move at your own pace if you want. You can just go to dex.michaelbrooks.ca/contributing-to-Cordova, or just go to the domain and it'll have a link there. So to start with, when you're contributing to Apache Cordova, it's good to understand that it's distributed as PhoneGap. You can think of Apache Cordova largely as an engine that has various distributions. I often use the analogy of WebKit, where WebKit has a distribution of Safari. It also has a distribution of Chrome. And I've always viewed Apache Cordova in the same light. PhoneGap is the most popular distribution right now, but I'm sure we'll be seeing other ones eventually. So this talk is largely focusing on contributing to that engine, more so than any of the distributions. So to begin with, let's talk about open source. Let's not think about Apache Cordova, and let's think about contributing to open source. It was only a few years ago that I was just getting into open source. I saw PhoneGap, actually, and I couldn't help but say, hi, I like your project, and I want to help, but I have no idea how. I don't even know if I'm qualified. I really didn't feel like I was. So I think it's important to understand that the response, at least from our team in most open source projects, is awesome. Are you a developer, a designer, anyone else? Yes? Fantastic. We want you. You don't have to be the best developer out there. You don't have to be the best designer, although almost every open source project out there right now could use a few good designers. A good landing page the designer could kick up and a nice logo would make an already very good library that's open sourced feel a lot better and feel a lot more mature. But you can be anyone else, too. It really doesn't matter. A good example would be a technical writer, for example. I think documentation, of course, is in dire need for most JavaScript libraries, and having a technical writer, someone who has a developer background but actually chooses to stay current, but actually instead write documentation or evangelize in some form. Those are rare people, but if you are one and you feel like getting into open source, you're extremely valuable to almost any project. I'm just going to check the time. Cool, 3:20. So a couple years ago when I first started, the immediate thought for me was, I want to join the PhoneGap open source project, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid of criticism. I'm afraid of making mistakes. University has really taught me that I can code. I can give my code to a professor. He looks at it, but no one else ever sees it. I get a grade, and that's it. It's my little treasure. I don't want anyone else to look at it because I'm afraid that I might be doing it wrong. Someone else might criticize it. And that's probably the biggest thing to overcome in open source. Our response inside Apache Cordova is, meh, don't worry about it. Your code will be criticized, but everyone means it in the nicest possible way. We just want our project to be best. So if you haven't written the best code possible, we'll mentor you. We'll make suggestions. You can make changes because the next time you'll know what to do, and you're a valuable asset to us. You're also going to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, and not a single person on our project cares. We'll point it out to you so you don't make that mistake again, but we don't hold it. We never even really remember that you made that mistake. It's a learning process. So overcoming those two bits will get you into open source faster than anything else. It's also important to realize that all projects are different. Every single open source project has some different process for contributing code. But don't panic. You don't have to know the process perfect. They're going to document it, and if they don't document it, it just means that they're probably really easygoing. If they're very strict about code standards or the way they accept pull requests, they're going to tell you about it. If they have nothing written down, well, just do your best. They'll probably accept it. And that's kind of where we sat with PhoneGap, and it's worked extremely well for us. We want contributors. We don't want to dictate how you do your own code. It's more important that we get lots of contributors and we can educate you to do what we want. So Brian and I were talking about this, and we really feel like it's worth distinguishing the difference between a contributor and a committer. Contributors, open source contributors, that's a term we always hear. And it has this level of prestige. You've contributed to WebKit or something like that. I don't think the definition is really right, at least in my mind. To me, if you've in some way mentioned Apache Cordova or PhoneGap, you're a contributor to our community, at least in our eyes. And I would consider you to be the heart of any open source project. Contributors get the word out about the project. They make it very popular because they are the people using it. Without you, even the best project out there would just die away. And so I think the term contributor is really undermined at the moment. And we've been trying hard to really acknowledge the contributors inside of Apache Cordova because the barrier of entry is extremely low. Every single person in this room is probably a contributor. If you've told anyone that you're coming to this event, I would consider you a contributor. If you're wearing the shirt, you're a contributor. If you're tweeting about us, you're already a contributor. So on to some of the examples. The simplest example I would consider is a blog post. This example is from out of me just writing about HTML5, and he just happens to use PhoneGap build. So he's essentially contributing to PhoneGap build. He's helping promote it. He's potentially ragging on it. I consider that still a good thing. I don't care if you point out the flaws. You're going to help the project because we're just going to fix those flaws. It's a good thing. So negative or positive blog posts, you're still helping out the project, and we appreciate it. Stack Overflow, if you're someone asking a question, or if you're someone answering a question, you're still contributing to PhoneGap or Apache Cordova. And again, this is just increasing the popularity of our project. And as a result, we can throw events like this and have everyone here, which is pretty awesome. Google Groups, of course. You can ask questions about PhoneGap, others answer. All of us are contributors. Twitter, if you're like a lot of us on the team, you might go to bed at night, and before bed, you will search PhoneGap. You'll see anyone who's like commenting or have questions about PhoneGap and answer it. And that's what we do. And if you happen to do that, that's awesome. If you even just tag PhoneGap, you're helping us out. IRC, if you ever have any questions and you want the answer almost immediately, hop on our freenode.net hash PhoneGap channel. We have 100+ people now, and there's some awesome discussions going on, and people will answer your questions almost immediately. It's incredible. It's awesome. A more extreme example of contributing, in my mind, is writing or patching a plugin. You're coding. You're creating a third-party plugin, and if it's popular enough, we'll probably just bring it in to the main project. Or at the very least, something like what happened with Lenny and PhoneGap build. Lenny will fork it. PhoneGap build will use it as one of the flagship examples for what they're working towards. PhoneGap-minded JavaScript libraries or tools. So like jQuery Mobile, for example, they have a PhoneGap section for their own tool. jQuery Mobile isn't necessarily designed for PhoneGap, but it works well, and they address the questions around it. The example here is the Ripple emulator by the Tiny Hippos, so it works perfect with PhoneGap. Wasn't necessarily designed for PhoneGap. It works with other libraries too, but they do promote and think about PhoneGap, and they contribute to our project as committers also, which is awesome. If you've created an app, again, you're a contributor. That's awesome. Go to phonegap.com and tell us about your app so that we know. We'll likely feature it if it's really nice. Another extreme example, hosting a meetup. We have so many meetups, it's insane. This one's from LA. Right here, if you go to meetup.com/PhoneGap, you can see all of our other meetups. I think that's a pretty extreme example. If you're willing to host and throw an event, it's a ton of work. Again, talking about PhoneGap like we're doing today and posting the slides online. Again, awesome contributor, telling people about it. Writing a book, more extreme example, but you're still helping out the project. And we're trying to embrace this in some way. We've started up a community release notes. We got it from a couple other projects who were doing it also, but it's a fairly simple process. Go onto GitHub, you clone the PhoneGap community release notes, edit the README. It's just a list of every article, every blog, every event that's happened, anything that you've done. If you want to promote it, just add your entry there. You can plug yourself, you can link to your home page, you can link to your Twitter account. We don't care, that's awesome. Send us a pull request. Colleen or Steve are going to merge it. Yes, that's right. Our marketing girl knows how to merge pull requests, which is amazing. And every month we do a blog post, so you get all the PhoneGap blogs traffic to your site, which is a ton. Estimated interpolation, huge. So well worth it. We're trying hard to embrace our community and forward the community onto you. So take advantage of this, really you should. Now the other side, the committer. Now, contributing is nice, communities are wonderful, but I know what you want to write code. And so we have this one question. So you think you're ready for the lush life of an open source developer? We have a very luxurious life, very exciting life. Are you ready for the parties? It's pretty awesome. I know. Are you ready for all the attention from the opposite sex? Yeah. And are you ready for the popularity? We're extremely popular. And this can be you too, with just a little bit of work. All you have to do is follow the Apache way. And so if we focus more around Apache side of Apache Cordova, you start to wonder what Apache is and why we even moved to it. The condensed version is Apache is a foundation that protects our project and just ensures that it continues to move in the direction of the community. And it protects the project by ensuring that the code that we accept from everyone else is rights-free. We're not going to infect our code base and distribute it to everyone else, so it's extremely safe to use our code. And no single body can take advantage of this project to move it in a single direction. IBM and Adobe are probably the main contributors to this project as a mass, but we still can't take advantage of this project and move it in the direction that suits our company best. Apache protects the project from that. Everyone in the community has a voice of where this project goes, and that's extremely important, and it's really nice. But with all these niceties comes some complications. The Apache way is complicated. It complicates the code contribution process. It really gets in the way of us getting more committers. And so we're working towards ways to accelerate that. And one example is this handy little guide that I'm going through right now. You can become a committer in roughly 3, 5, 6 steps. When I initially made these slides, it was 3 steps. 3 steps, and yeah, I figured, yeah, you can become a full code committer. And then I realized, no, it has to be 5. And then I eventually just settled on 6. But it's not that complicated, but this guide will walk you through it. First step, source code. Open source project, source code, extremely important. Sign up for GitHub, github.com. Click the gigantic blue button. It's free. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about pricing. Pick a name, and you've got yourself a GitHub repo, and that's pretty rad. You can then set up Git, help.github.com/articles/setupgit. They'll do Linux, Mac, and Windows. So after following those guides, your system's set up to run Git. You can then rejoice with a happy dance, which is always nice. And then you can fork and clone all of or any of the Apache Cordova projects. So you can head over to github.com/apache/incubator-cordova-whatever to fork and clone that project. Soon, hopefully, we're going to lose the incubator prefix, which means we're fully into Apache, which is really rad, but for now, it's hanging out there. Now a little bit of side note. So Apache actually hosts the canonical Git repository at git.cordova.io. But the reality is GitHub offers a much better service than what Apache can do for Git hosting. So Apache then mirrors to GitHub, thankfully. So you can actually go to github.com/apache to see all of their projects. Just as a FYI, though, it's always good to know that it's a mirror. So when we're pushing code, we're actually pushing code into Apache's Git repository. It's then mirrored over to GitHub. You can still interact with the GitHub one. You just can't file issues. Pull requests still work. And the code is roughly 12 hours out of date at any given time, which is unfortunate. Apache and GitHub are working together to try to figure something out. Step 2, the issue tracker. If you've got the source code, the next thing to do is figure out what you actually can do with that source code. And the issue tracker is a great place for that. All Apache projects use Jira, not GitHub issues. To sign up for Jira, it's a relatively simple process. You just go to issues.cordova.io. You then press the login button. And then you realize that, wait, I don't actually have a Jira account. But it's OK. You can just trust us with this. You can then click the sign up button. Yeah, it's a little confusing. Sorry about that. We have no control over it. Very weird process. But after that, you've got yourself a Jira account. Next step, license agreement. Almost any open source project that you're going to be contributing to has a license agreement. The smaller ones are quite informal. You don't have to do anything. You can just push code, they'll accept it, and everything's awesome. But for the bigger projects, a much more formalized process exists, and that's enforced heavily inside of Apache Cordova. It's a good thing. Contributor license agreements basically relieves the committer of the rights of the creative work being the code, the documentation, or the artwork, whatever it is, and just ensures that Apache is accepting code that isn't infected. It's clean code that they can take rights on and own. But I know what you're saying. Just tell me where to sign. I don't care about the reason. I just want to commit code. And you only have to worry about one question. Are you contributing on company time? A lot of us do. If the answer is no, you simply download the ICLA, which is the Individual Contributor License Agreement, from apache.org/licenses/icla.txt, and you're good to go. On the other hand, if you're actually contributing on company time, then you still have to sign the individual one. It is required. Everyone has to sign that individual one. But you also then have to sign a CCLA, a Corporation Contributor License Agreement, which is basically just acknowledging that your company is working with Apache. It's a little odd. There's no real link between the CCLA and the ICLA unless you happen to use your company's name in your individual license agreement. And if you happen to switch companies at some point, that connection is completely lost. So we've always kind of wondered how this is enforced, but Apache wants it signed, and it's very beneficial for your company. At the very least, your company is listed as an Apache contributor, which is just great cred when it comes to hiring open source developers. Now, regardless of which of these CCLAs you grab, or CLAs that you grab, they're text files, which is really weird. They're truncated at 80 characters, which is also really weird, especially for people who have longer names. It gets to be a little annoying. But regardless, it's what you can work with. You can take that text file and you can print it out on real paper if you really like to kill trees, or you can just save it as a PDF. You can then sign it with ink if you've printed it out on real paper, or you can digitally sign it, which a lot of people don't realize with a PDF. If you're using Apple, you can actually just open Apple Preview. Under Tools, they have a signature tool. You sign a piece of paper on physically, hold it in front of your webcam, it takes a screenshot of your signature, and then you can click the little signature tool and click anywhere on a PDF, and it inserts your signature. It's amazing. It saves so much time, so I highly recommend it. I'm sure other PDF programs do it also, but that one gets you up and running almost immediately. Afterwards, scan the document if you printed it out on real paper, and then you can email it to secretary@apache.org. They don't really make that very clear. That's why I emphasize it there. Apache seems to emphasize a fax number, which is really weird. Difficult for a lot of people to find a fax machine. If you do feel like faxing it, use hellofax.com. It's just a web service. You submit any kind of file, and it'll fax it anywhere. It's really awesome. So if you follow these steps, you can sign that CLA or almost immediately, which is pretty awesome. And again, you're listed as an Apache contributor after that. If you're trying to apply for jobs at open source companies, being an Apache contributor goes a long way. It's pretty awesome, and it's a very simple process. All right, you've got the source code, you've got the Jira account, you've signed your rights away. It's okay to now write code, so you have to figure out what to do. The next step is join the mailing list. I know your response, cool, just point me to the website. Unfortunately, this isn't Google Groups. Apache is old school. They use the old school way of mailing lists, which is just email. And so it's a little different to work with. To subscribe to the Apache mailing list, you just have to send an email to callback-dev-subscribe, or you can add the digest in there if you want to just get a daily digest. To clarify, you can send any email with any subject, with any content. It doesn't matter at all. It's just simply a ping to that server, and it subscribes you. People don't realize that. It's kind of weird, I know. To send a message with the mailing list, if you want to write, "Dear cool dudes, let's talk about Android," you simply compose an email to callback-dev@incubator.apache.org. I know these email addresses are kind of weird, and once we graduate, we'll drop the callback term for Cordova, and the incubator will drop too. But for now, that's how it is. After you've subscribed, you'll probably realize that we talk a lot. You'll get a lot of emails. And if you're like, "Oh my God, guys, you talk way too much," fair enough, we're not hurt. You can actually unsubscribe at any time. To do that, just simply send an email to callback-dev-unsubscribe. Again, it's a black hole. Send an email with any subject, any content. It'll just unsubscribe you. You don't have to spam our dev list asking how to unsubscribe. And again, after you subscribe, the first thing, at least to me, that comes to mind is, "Hey guys, I've joined the party late. What did I miss?" Because it's all email, how do you ever read the old messages? There's no web interface. It's a little frustrating. Old school mailing lists are too cool for archives or useful web interfaces. Thankfully, this is just an opportunity for someone else. And so you can seek out lurker services that monitor these mailing lists and create a web interface. MarkMail is the popular one, not the greatest interface I've seen, but it works well enough. The address, markmail.org, so on and so forth. You can see all of our old discussions there, and it's pretty fast. But once you've subscribed, if you're using something like Gmail, then threading happens, and it's pretty awesome. Cool. You're now talking with everyone. How do you get started? I can't emphasize this enough. Just be active. Read the mailing list. Watch Jira. Every bit of communication happens on these two channels. If we're not saying it on the mailing list, or if we're not documenting it on Jira, it didn't happen, and it's not happening. So there's no secret channels here. There's no secret meetings, nothing like that. That's why our mailing list and Jira are so active, because it's how we work. Up in the Vancouver office in Canada, Joe and I, we won't even discuss anything. I'll just create an issue, and he'll respond in a comment. But we're literally 20 feet away from each other. Yeah, it's kind of weird, but it works really well. And the important part is that our other colleagues all around the world stay up to date. Same thing for the mailing list. Next step, after you're active, after you're staying up to date, make yourself known. You should be vocal, very vocal on the mailing list and Jira. Just make your intentions well known. If you don't even know where to start, just introduce yourself, say what platform or what project or what skill set you're interested in working with or developing, and we'll hand you issues. We fully will embrace you. So don't feel like you're kind of like trying to figure out what you need to do. We'll help you out with that. Next step is choose your battle. Recommended way is to just head on to Jira, find an issue that's slated for whatever release we're coming up on, comment on it to say, "Hey dudes, I can work on this, so don't worry about it." Typically, you can press the Start Progress button, which just shows everyone that you're actually working on it, which is awesome. And then you can go and get shit done, which is what you're good at. I've kind of categorized the work into 3 different levels. The easiest is documentation. We can use anyone. If you're doing a grammar change, or if you want to document a guide that we've never written, I'd love you to write it. If you speak another language, feel free to translate the documentation. That'd be incredible also. All of our documentation is markdown files. Pretty straightforward, low barrier of entry. There's some really great renders out there. So that's definitely the easiest place to start with, even just to get your feet wet with the contribution process. Next up, I classify Cordova JS as medium. And the only reason, I'm not saying JavaScript is easier. Cordova JS has an amazing test suite. So when you make a change, you can run the tests, and you have confidence that you've probably not broke anything. And so that's why I'm saying Cordova JS is an amazing place. If you see an issue, work on it. Also, Phil and Gord really head up that project, and they're both very accessible online. They're very clear. They're awesome guys. The hardest is platform specifics, and I'm not trying to cast native languages as being hard, because that's not necessarily true. It's just that we haven't really matured our test suites for that. If you feel like starting tests for one of the native platforms, create an issue, we've certainly got some discussions to talk around that. But yeah, it's a good spot to dive into and work on. Plugins, any kind of API falls actually across all three of those levels. So if you're interested in jumping into accelerometer, you can just choose which difficulty level. And after you've made your change, just send us a pull request through GitHub. That's what we're encouraging. Through Apache, you can actually on the mailing list do a git patch, a little file of a diff, and post it up there, but no one does that. A GitHub pull request works so much better, and we'll pull it in. It's pretty awesome, I'd say. Now, so you've committed once, you've written some code. We ask you what you kind of want in life, and you respond, I want committer status. You know, what is your quest? I seek the Holy Grail. Good news, compared to other open source projects, we're super lenient with accepting contributors. We're not protective of this project at all. We want as many committers and contributors as we can get. And so all you have to do is just show us that you're a swell person. You're trustworthy in some form, and we'll probably give you committer access, complete push access to all of our repos. We have faith that you're not going to mess anything up, and if you do with Git, we can just correct it. Hurt our project, and we'll take your rights away. That's kind of our mentality. So we trust you immediately, kind of like a dog. And only when you hit us do we start to suspect something. We do have a recipe for committership. This is the Apache recipe that we've decided on. And again, super informal compared to any other process. Our requirements are, you're active on the mailing list. You've spoke. We know who you are. You +1 or -1 certain things. You give constructive feedback. You're active on the issue tracker. You've told us what you're working on. You've created issues or you've closed issues. That's rad. Ideally, you've merged some code. That can be docs. That can be tests. We love both of those. Or it can actually be code chunks. Patches are fine. You don't have to feel like you need to do a big feature. We probably won't accept a big feature from a stranger. We'd rather see small little bits at first. After those three, just ask. Ask us for committer access, and we'll give it to you. It's kind of crazy. It's a very lenient project, and I love it for that. And step 6, you can celebrate. You can do your happy dance after you've got committer access. That's my talk. Thank you, guys. Slides were by me. All the content by Apache and the Cordova team. Totally ripped off the oatmeal comic, at least to the best of my ability. I hope you enjoy PhoneGap 2.0, and please help us release PhoneGap 3.0. Really appreciate it.